to any afflicted CEOs that are watching this, I want to cure your AI psychosis. And obviously, I need to put a disclaimer up front. I'm not a doctor and I am not giving medical advice. If you have questions about your mental health, please seek out a legitimate mental health professional. And instead, I want to talk about the fun kind of AI psychosis, the kind where people see LLMs as this like magical genie in a bottle that they can rub and have pop out, and then it can solve any problem for them if they can only prompt it correctly. Aaron Levie, the CEO of Box, recently tweeted that CEOs are uniquely prone to this kind of AI psychosis. He says that CEOs just don't perform that last mile of work, so they never actually see the effort that's required to coax an LLM to perform useful work. They just see the happy path where they tell somebody to do something and they show up at some point in the future and say, "Here you go, boss. I made this prototype with an LLM prompt just like you asked." So if you're a CEO and you still view LLMs as this magic genie in a bottle that'll pop out and do anything, I'm here to help you. I'm going to tell you exactly how you can tell the difference between something that an LLM can do by itself and something that has a whole bunch of hidden work, both in prompting and in verification. And anybody riding the New York City subway these days can obviously see this because the subway is completely plastered in AI ads right now. And they make these like really preposterous claims, like make an entire presentation with just a single prompt. And if you use these day to day, you know that this is completely disingenuous. They straight up just cannot do this. But there must be enough subway riders that are influenced by this that they keep running the ads. And obviously, the subway riders must be the type of people that can approve budget for third-party integrations. And you might wonder, why can't it? Why can't it make a whole presentation with a single prompt? And let's save that for a little later. First, I kind of want to talk about how LLMs have changed over time and bring up a few questions that you can ask yourself when you're trying to decide whether or not an LLM can easily do something, or if there's probably a lot of hidden work involved in getting it done. And to really do a good job of understanding what LLMs can and cannot do, we really need to go back to the beginning. At release, ChatGPT could do things that no other computer had ever done. You could type literally anything that you wanted into it, and it would be able to do it. It would be able to respond in like a coherent way in English or the language that you used to the request that you made. Did you need to write an email to a business? ChatGPT will do it for you. Did you need to write a poem about your friend in the style of Walker, Texas Ranger? Giddy up, partner, it's right there. So then why didn't the entire world just lose their jobs at that point? It was because LLMs were absolutely useless for real work. They confidently lied over and over. They fabricated citations. They became legitimately unhinged if a conversation extended for more than a few rounds of back and forth. They couldn't follow simple step-by-step instructions without getting lost. It would generate code that wouldn't compile or use imaginary APIs on imaginary libraries. It couldn't count the letters in a word and still can't. It failed at trivial reasoning exercises. Sometimes their rudimentary safety checks would prevent you from doing a very basic task that had nothing to do with the safety check. And other times it would encourage people to kill themselves. And that is like a partial list of their shortcomings. Like it had some utility, but largely the outputs were just a novelty. Like you could not use it for real work in any legitimate way. But LLMs have improved so quickly over the past few years. Each of the above problems that I mentioned have basically gotten better with a bunch of mitigations that they've added, and they've also gained new capabilities as well. They got chain of thought reasoning strengthened with reinforcement learning, so now they can actually think. They can call tools. Then there are even now protocols like MCP that allow them to interact with the data in basically any application. Every few months, they get model upgrades that supercharge their abilities. And they are world beaters. They are solving novel math problems that humans have been trying to solve for decades. They can perform complicated research tasks and produce convincing summaries of the results. They beat software engineers in coding competitions. And by all accounts, they have written every college essay for like the past few years. So I don't blame anyone for drawing that trend line of its capabilities and saying, if an LLM can perform high-level mathematics or implement a complicated step-by-step pull request, then surely it can just do any job. I have to level with you. In all of that time, with all those improvements, LLMs have basically gone from starting at being absolutely useless for real work, and now they are somewhat useful for real work. They just cannot produce a final product unsupervised, especially if they don't have any way to verify it themselves. You just can't trust its own voice to be like an authoritative professional output. If you are a skilled LLM user, you can absolutely save some time. And LLM use is a skill. It's a skill with a very low skill floor. Literally, the barrier is being able to type text into an editor about a topic, and a very high skill ceiling, which is like understanding their capabilities and understanding what context that they need to be given and how to provide verification steps so they don't go too far off the rails. The diagram that I have here is not meant to be pixel perfect, but I stand by this basic idea. For each LLM prompt, there is some amount of intrinsic context building that it needs to do and some intrinsic amount of verification. And if the output is too far from the desired result, then you're definitely losing time over just doing it yourself. It's also helpful to break outside of the tech sphere in order to see how other people that are not techies use these technologies. Go talk to a competent lawyer about how useful they find LLMs. They'll say they're great. They save so much time. You can summarize these like really complex documents. You can have them generate briefs, and they can do all of these other things that, normally would have been very painstaking things for a lawyer to do. But they say that you need to check every single thing that it outputs. You don't want to build your arguments on a hallucinated case. You don't want it to build its arguments on an incorrect summary. And you also definitely don't want to email the opposing counsel a bunch of LLM slop that they're just going to, have a field day with. So, they do really save you time, but you really need to build the context and you really need to verify the output. And what the hell? Why can an LLM solve an Erdos problem, which is one of the most complicated math problems that people have been throwing themselves at for decades, that people have been unable to do? Why can an LLM do it? Why can an LLM beat software engineers at a coding competition, but it can't build a simple presentation, which is a task that a lot of people might just delegate to an intern? And there are like really two basic questions that go to the heart of what an LLM can and cannot do. One, how easily can the LLM supplement its own context? And two, how quickly can the LLM verify its own outputs? All right, first, let's revisit this question of these New York City subway ads that I saw that promised that you could build an entire presentation in one prompt. Let's talk about what it really takes to build a presentation from start to finish. Let's say that you're building a pitch deck for a new product offering and you want potential customers to buy it. Your customers might want to be told what problem they're experiencing. They might want to know what value your specific offering delivers. They might want an overview of how it works. Data, you might be able to pitch your story a little better if you have a lot of supporting data that shows how it works and how it improves people's outcomes. You might want to show industry research showing how people are solving similar problems like this and why your solution is better. You might want social proof showing what people said when they actually tried your solution instead of other things. You might need to tell them the story of what a successful migration looks like. And you might also need to tell them about offers or trials or concierge services that you offer that would make it easier to get a pilot project out the door. To successfully deliver a presentation, you might need to know how long it is. In order to vet the content, you might need to make sure that you don't put any information that might piss off your investors or piss off key stakeholders inside of your company. If you know something about the people you're delivering to, you might actually want to include that in the pitch deck. If a LLM is digging through the whole context of your company, it might even find things that you definitely don't want to put in the presentation. It may learn that a feature in your presentation is a roadmap feature that is technically not code complete, and you may not want to mention that fact. The LLM might figure out that everything at your company is a giant shit show and you're just keeping it together for public appearances. They don't need to know that. And the second question you need to ask yourself is, how quickly can the LLM verify its output? How would you verify a presentation that you didn't write? Let's think about that. First, you kind of need to flip through the presentation, right? You look for any weird outputs, any weird slides. Are there overlapping regions that shouldn't be overlapping? Are a couple of things a little too close? If there are two images next to each other, do they visually clash in some way? And some of this might be handled by the LLM, but truly at the end of the day, it's just a human experience, and you kind of need to just walk through it yourself and see if anything just doesn't pass the smell test. And then next, you really need to nitpick the content, are all of the sentences correct? Is it using good word choices throughout the whole presentation? Did it misunderstand some of the source material and it needs to actually be reworked a little bit for accuracy? And then next, you really want to go through the presentation slide by slide. You want to make sure that it actually flows naturally when it's all said out loud. Are there any unnatural moments or kind of weird things that shouldn't have followed each other? Any jarring transitions? Does it need to be restructured or reworked in any way? That's just kind of the beginning of what it takes to really do a good presentation. So it's pretty clear to me, just talking through it, that the LLM can't possibly verify everything. Maybe it can fact check itself or something like that, but it can't truly understand that it made a good presentation end to end. It can't iterate and recurse on itself in order to refine itself. But, there are aspects that the LLM probably can help with. It can find source documents, it can answer questions about data that it can access, and it can probably generate the slides as a first pass. So it's very likely that you could actually build the presentation faster, but there is a tremendous amount of hidden work involved. Uncovering the full context of what you need to say during the presentation. Who are you talking to? What do they want to hear? What do they need to hear? And finally, being a strong advocate for the audience and respecting their time when you're going through the LLM output and correcting it. So what did we learn here? What is the cure for AI psychosis? The cure for AI psychosis is simply the ability to find all of the hidden work involved in a task. If you think that an LLM can add to its own context by just doing simple web searches or even perform its own logical thinking, then absolutely, the LLM can really churn through it and really save you time. It doesn't need people at all. It can just do it all by itself. However, if there's more information that can fit into its context window, if it needs to understand how people feel about things, if it needs to, if it needs some extra guidance in order to figure out what it should know while it does a problem and what it shouldn't know while it does a problem, then you're going to have a lot of extra context curation. That's going to be a lot of hidden work and a lot of extra time. And then you have the question of how easily can the LLM check its work? If it can just write code and compile it and run it and see if it does the thing that it's expected to and it passes the unit tests, then you don't need people in the loop. It can actually accelerate you quite a bit. However, once you get into questions of how do human beings feel about this presentation, or does this otherwise correct coding change introduce unwanted emergent behavior when run in a production system, then you're going to find that there's a lot of extra hidden work in verifying it and actually going through and correcting it so that it actually reads like a professional output. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like it. If you want to see my next one, and if you think I'm an idiot, then the comment section is right below. Let me know what you think. Peace out.